Welcome to Uncommon Sense, where we do our best to make it common again. I'm your host, Adrian Ahlquist, and today we have a special episode because I'm joined by my dad, again, Dale Ahlquist. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. What about you? How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Yay.
It's been a long day. We are currently setting up the studio for the podcast, and you get to kind of see it evolve if you're watching this on YouTube, and this is the current state of things. So updates to follow.
You can see that we are still in the midst of the crisis, as Gilbert and Francis are required to wear masks.
Yes.
But since we're talking, we don't have to.
Yes, someone in this room put those masks on their face. Yeah. Well, in honor of All Saints' Day, which would have been this last Sunday, we wanted to address the canonization regarding G.K. Chesterton. And we want to just talk about that. And I think talking to you would be the perfect person to talk to. So yeah, let's get into it. So some people think it's a crazy idea for Chesterton to become a saint. And some people think it's a bad idea. And we're going to talk about that. But first off, where did you get the idea that Chesterton should be canonized?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And what's interesting is that it goes back to before I was Catholic. I was Baptist, and in the Baptist theology, there's no place for the communion of the saints. It just isn't part of our theology. You pray directly to God. You pray through Jesus, in Jesus' name. You don't pray through saints. You don't ask a saint to pray for you in the Catholic, in the Baptist faith. And yet, Baptists ask each other to pray for them. Would you pray for me? So the concept of intercessory prayer is there, but not the concept of sainthood. And so it was very remarkable that I had no place for the communion of saints in my theology, but I was certainly on my way to becoming Catholic, and because of reading G.K. Chesterton and associating with some very fine Catholic people who were Chestertonians. But I read an article that suggested that Chesterton's cause should be introduced. And I have to say that I went from having zero understanding of what the communion of saints meant to understanding it completely in the twinkling of an eye. I had an epiphany. Everything made sense all at once. I suddenly understood that, oh yeah, the saints don't get between you and Christ. They bring you closer to Christ. The saints are your companions. There's this communion of saints and Chesterton certainly had been my companion. They are your friends. Chesterton had become my friend. Saints understand you. That's why you have a relationship with them. And they're the natural ones you would want to be your advocate, to stand, in your place. And I understood that Chesterton he'd already established himself as someone who understood
right.
me and represented me. And I had no doubt at all that Chesterton was in the presence of Christ. And
the way I had it explained to me one time, like praying to saints versus praying directly to God, is the analogy is, let's say you want to ask your mom or dad for something, and you're kind of nervous because you don't know how to broach the situation, but you could, if you don't want to ask your dad, you could ask your mom to intercede for you, and it's not an undermining of your dad. Your mom might be able to word it better, or just approach the situation better, or asking an older sibling who has your best interest at heart but is more articulate and stuff like that, and your parents like to see the siblings collaborate. So I think that might be a good analogy for the intercession of saints, right?
It's not a bad analogy at all, but it's the same idea of asking someone to pray for you.
Right.
You feel built up. You feel like there's more people representing what you want and what you need. But also there's the other weird thing about Catholic sainthood, the cult around every saint, something people don't understand, and certainly cult became a bad word in our culture in the last generation. But every saint has a cult around him or her, And I understood immediately that I was part of the cult of Chesterton, and that a cult is where people are devoted to that particular individual because their devotion to that person has made their faith deeper and stronger. And Chesterton had led me that far towards the Catholic faith, and that was one of the things that most impressed me about the whole process right then. And what really was interesting is that I said to my Catholic friends who were Chestertonians, who had said, we don't think it's a good idea that Chesterton is canonized because it would turn off all the non-Catholics towards Chesterton. People like Dale here, and there weren't many of us who were devoted to Chesterton back then, but they really coveted the few Protestants who were.
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you kidding?" I shall never forget this. Our idea of Catholic saints is that they're all barefoot 14-year-old girls, whereas a 300-pound cigar-smoking journalist. Now that's interesting. And I said, if you canonize Chesterton, I'll become Catholic. That was my big offer.
Yeah.
And I was, waiting for the limousine to pull up, and nothing happened. They just, they absolutely thought that was amusing.
So you had to become Catholic first, it sounds like.
I actually had to become Catholic through the normal channels. Nothing was offered to me whatsoever. Yeah. I had to go about like anybody else. And then, ironically, then I got involved with promoting his cause. But so it truly was an instantaneous understanding of the community of saints. And from that moment, I've never doubted that Chesterton belongs among the saints. And I've been, a proud member of the cult around him, too.
Nice. Well, could you explain how the process of canonization works? Because I have a feeling that some people are confused about that. I have a feeling because I was talking to some members, or should I say former members, who were concerned with us vouching for the canonization of Chesterton, and I thought it was disrespectful of us to try to have this be a thing and make this happen. So this might be a good time to address that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. A lot of people don't understand it, Adrian. They think that the Catholic Church decides who should we make a saint this week. Let's go down the list. This guy's good. Let's do him. Or this is a good one right here. No, they don't actually instigate anything. It's the cult that begins the process. A group of devotees to a particular person that those devotees feel is a saint. They're the ones who first make the case, and they go to a bishop, and it's usually the bishop who has some connection with the locality of the saint, so the place where that person was born, or where he's buried, or where he lived.
It's just like someone has to bring a case to a judge in order for him to do anything. He's not gonna sit there and he's like, oh, I'm gonna just decide to judge these things. Someone has to bring something to him. And that's what the case is with canonization.
Yeah, exactly. So it starts with the people who want him canonized. It doesn't start with the church coming down saying, let's canonize someone this week. It's we bring the case to the church, and we start with the bishop. It starts with the ordinary, and that's what's called first contact. And if the bishop thinks there's anything going on there, if he recognizes the validity of the cult, something happening with that group of people, he'll begin an investigation. And we approached the Bishop of Northampton, England, back in 2002. That was our first contact. Okay. And he was very interested, and he actually started instructing his priests to talk up Chesterton throughout his diocese, Northampton, England. And then he was kicked upstairs. He left the diocese and was made an archbishop somewhere else. And the new bishop came in, and so we started all over. And unfortunately, Bishop Peter Doyle didn't know anything about Chesterton. There's a verse in the gospel that Jesus says, the prophet is without honor in his own country. And I think, unfortunately, it really applied in this case, because not only was he not familiar, but he was not surrounded by people who were familiar with Chesterton. And it seemed to him, at any rate, that all the people who were interested in Chesterton were not local, not from around his diocese. And he said, well, you need a local cult. And I tried to make the case, well, I mean, this is a universal saint. This is a universal cult. There's people all over the world devoted to him.
And the idea of local is kind of changing, as we know, with the internet and everything. It no longer just refers to spatially, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he is local in that it's common people that are devoted to it, right? Yeah. Right. And but it's true. It truly is universal. And the there's other good examples of saints. In fact, the most famous recent saint from England.
Yeah.
I said India. England used to own India, but that's not it.
Your dad was from India.
My dad was from India, yeah. But Cardinal Newman, now Saint John Henry Newman, really never had a local cult at all. But the devotion started, on a much broader basis before they had to go through a local bishop in England. Well, so that's the process. The process is you go to the bishop. The bishop then orders an investigation. He has a priest do an investigation. It's not the same thing as the thorough work that's done by a postulator. That comes later. If the investigator turns in his report, the bishop makes a decision that, there's reason for going forward here. And then at that point, the bishop will go to the Congregation for Saints in Rome and say, do you know any objections immediately why we cannot open this cause? Okay. To get the nihil obstet. Are there any objections? If the congregation says no, the bishop will then declare that individual not venerable. The first thing is
blessed.
Servant of God.
Oh, servant of God. Venerable,
yeah,
then it's blessed.
Right. So servant of God. Then a postulator is appointed. And the postulator does a very thorough examination of the individual's life, and that is what's presented then to the Congregation for Saints, and then they would declare him venerable, and then they say the next vote is from God. Okay. So it's evidence of a miracle through that person's intercession, and one miracle verified would lead to beatification, blessed. And a second miracle, canonization, saint. Now, here's the question. I'll ask you this question. Okay. Who appoints the postulator?
Is it the people that want to open the cause? Or is it the...
You knew the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, but everyone assumes that the postulator is appointed by the bishop.
The bishop.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's the petitioner. The petitioner, the one who goes to the bishop, they're the ones who appoint the postulator because, again, he's representing the petitioners. And he's the one continuing to make the case to Rome, to the church, that the person gets canonized. So the petitioner would get to appoint the postulator.
Okay, good. So it's not only not disrespectful of us to try to open the cause, it is inherent to need the cause to be open. It's
how the process works.
Yeah,
this is exactly how the process works. The petitioner continues to push for their person that they want. Yeah,
good. Great. So you explained the process, and now where are we in that process?
All right. So this is where some people have made the objection.
Okay.
We did make we did ask the Bishop of Northampton, Peter Doyle, to open the cause, and he, after long consideration and deliberation, said, "I don't want to get in the way of the cause being opened, but I'm not the one who's going to open it." And he just did not feel comfortable. And I think it was probably a combination of his own knowledge or lack thereof of Chesterton, and he still didn't feel the presence of a local cult. That was part of his objection. He also was not comfortable about the issue of anti-Semitism. He didn't accuse Chesterton of being anti-Semitic, but he knew that the accusation was out there, and he didn't feel like it had been dealt with adequately or fully to his satisfaction in order to open the class. And then he had a third objection, which was more nuanced, which is he didn't say he didn't get a sense of Chesterton's personal spirituality, which
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. and for me, I mean, the first two objections are really the easy ones to take care of. The local cult, there is actually a local cult in England, and we presented good evidence of that.
Mm-hmm. And
we actually presented good evidence to against the objections of Chesterton's alleged anti-Semitism, which I think has been a huge distraction, and people will hang their hat on it in order to just not deal with Chesterton as a whole, but they just want to derail the process with that. And we've dealt with it thoroughly. Gilbert magazine devoted a whole issue to it. There's an entire book written by Anne Farmer called Chesterton and the Jews, and several other defenses have been offered. And I am preparing a very exhaustive piece of research. We'll just maybe take everything point by point. Again, we don't believe that's an issue at all.
Right.
It just doesn't fit in with Chesterton at all.
No.
But this third one about the spirituality, it shows the difficulty of getting a layperson canonized.
Yeah, that's true. I believe that. Yeah.
Religious orders go in there and they get their founder. They have all this, all this support and everything. Here's the founder. Here's our order, and here's his spiritual writings. And look, yeah, and that's pretty easy to get what someone who's in the religious life to take out their what their spirituality is.
Yeah.
A layperson, Chesterton wrote very little about himself. Ironically, the most he ever wrote about himself was just telling stories, illustrations about his life.
Mm-hmm.
When he talks about his spiritual life, he's very mum, really. He talks about the faith in a very full way. He talks about theology in a full way, and he's got a clear description of Christianity, a great defense of the Catholic faith. But his own prayer life, his own spiritual life, it's something he didn't write about. It's something he kept quiet.
Okay.
In the same way that Jesus asks us to go pray in a room by ourselves, right?
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so what about the objections to Chesterton becoming a saint? We mentioned it. It was that it wouldn't it would not allow more people to discover to discover Catholicism through Chesterton. What do you say about that?
The original objection that was going to be that it's going to turn off the non-Catholics.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of the ongoing objections. Like, why people like Chesterton already? Why bother? You're going to make him too Catholic. I mean, that's
right. That's the.
And I've heard that objection all along. You're making him too Catholic. Well, he was Catholic, and the fact is, his conversion he called the chief event of his life. It was the most important thing that ever happened to him was to become Catholic. And those on that long list of converts, you've interviewed a lot of them on the podcast.
Yep, my name is Lazarus.
Yeah, when I put that book together, I had a hard time choosing that few number of people because
to clarify, this is the book My Name is Lazarus, which I've been probably mentioning in every episode. But for people who are new, it's a collection of stories of people who were converted. And it at least influenced their conversion was influenced by G.K. Chesterton, and you put that together. Together. Yeah. I
edited the book, 34 testimonials in there, but
very inspiring.
And the list that I have, which keeps growing, it has over 500 names on it, and it's a list I should have started making earlier because it. So obviously, people who've been touched by Chesterton, it's the way he brought them to the church. That's very important.
And it's I think it's slightly erroneous to think that him being Catholic or obviously Catholic, if he's a saint, he's more obviously Catholic, that being like a thing that leads people away all of a sudden, because it's not that we want to trick people into becoming Catholic. It should be readily apparent how to live the Catholic faith and how to live the Catholic life.
Well,
right?
I think, amen. And I think it also goes back to that intrigue that I felt the first time when, oh, wow, a 300-pound cigar-smoking saint. I want to know more about this because this is not my image of a saint. And I think that's the striking thing. Here's a new kind of saint, a saint really for our times.
Yeah.
And a lay saint. And if he is a saint, well, that really is the most important thing about him.
Gotcha. Cool. Now, what about the people who don't think he is a saint? They're not that they want to, keep it a secret, but what are the people who just don't think he's a saint at all?
Right. So the objections have been things like, well, he was fat, right? That's an objection. There he is. He's not that fat, but he's,
Thomas Aquinas was fat, right? I'm pretty sure. And he's one of the greatest saints of all time.
One of the greatest saints of all time was also fat, right? And by the way, Thomas Aquinas being canonized did not prevent people from reading him.
I think it probably helped him a little bit.
It did. And Pope John the 23rd, a fat saint,
Mm-hmm.
a fat saint. I remember the late William Oddy, who was also fat, who was also a convert because of reading Chesterton. He was an Anglican priest who became Catholic, and he wrote an article early on about here's a new kind of saint, and he said the world needs more fat saints. But along that, it was he was a glutton. If he was fat, there was obviously some sinful thing about him. And Chesterton, the great irony there is that he was not a glutton.
On the contrary.
Yeah, the evidence is that he did not eat very much. There's personal testimonies from his friends, from his secretary, that they were surprised at how little he ate. He was not someone who just sat down and gorged himself, or as my high school coach said, gouged himself. But so he probably had a glandular condition that and retained his water, and that's probably he was always a large man, and twice in his life had some real health problems that were that resulted in his great weight gain, but were not caused by the weight gain, and and one of them led to his death. But the case is he simply didn't live an indulgent lifestyle. In fact, there's a great, I think he writes in the book, The Four Faultless Felons, about the man who's the secret ascetic, who looks like he's bon vivant and everything, but secretly he's an ascetic. And I think Chesterton maybe was that person. Now, he did smoke, which, of course, we know is a mortal sin, and anyone who smokes is evidently breathing the devil's mist right there. So there's nothing we can do about that, but we're hoping at some point that they'll revise the Ten Commandments and finally get that additional, this was a monkish interpolation that added that 11th commandment. And then he also drank, and he defended drinking during Prohibition as a puritanical misunderstanding of what righteousness means. Puritanism is righteous indignation about the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
And in the name of the one who turned water into wine.
We're Baptists against smoking as well as drinking.
Oh yeah, smoking, drinking, card playing, dancing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
A funny quote. I forgot who it is. I'm sure some people listening will know who this person is, but it's that a Puritan is someone who thinks or is worried that someone somewhere is having a good time.
Yeah, it's attributed to George Bernard Shaw, Chesterton's
there you go.
Philosophical opponent, and yet Chesterton
agreed on that one.
Yeah, and Chesterton actually accused Shaw of being a Puritan.
Oh, that's
because Shaw was a non-smoking vegetarian.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, non-drinking. Yeah, that's a great funny thing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I have one more serious question. Is this just a crazy idea? I don't know what you want to do with that question.
Well, it's funny. I guess it goes along with the other objections. Chesterton can't be a saint. He's too funny. That's he's a clown. He's a buffoon. There's that objection. You can't take him seriously. And that's for the people that's their only image of Chester. Just like the only thing they know about him is that he's anti-Semitic. That shows they don't know anything about him. If the only thing they know about him is that he's a wit or a joker, well then hopefully they'll follow that wit to the truth. And it does sound crazy at first that the 300-pound cigar smoking journalist would have a halo, right?
Right.
And the Chesterton's point is that it's only in the Catholic faith that we believe that there should be a patron saint for plumbers, because there should be someone who was holy who plumbed perfectly. and for all the trades, that there's someone who in that trade was holy in the living out of that trade. And Chesterton was a journalist, and he lived among a very worldly group of people, and yet he maintained a purity and a holiness that impressed everyone around him. The people who knew him knew he was holy. I love what W.R. Titterton, his colleague who also became a Catholic as a result of knowing Chesterton, wrote the first biography of Chesterton. And in there, he argued that Chesterton should be a saint. And he says he was always thinking about God. He was always thinking about God. And now, if that isn't a description of a saint, someone who's in a constant communion with God. Another one of his friends said he was always being fed by a spiritual Eucharist.
Cool.
Now, those are really mystical, deep ideas. Yeah. And we love the fact that Chesterton was funny and that he's joyful and that he laughed. But that joy comes from something deep within inside him. And people are drawn to that goodness. And that's why we think he should be numbered among the saints.
Cool. That was a good defense and a good explanation. And I agree. So I have a prayer card here. Let's see if it shows up. The glare is bad, but
there it is.
Here we go. Yeah, it's a prayer card, and it has the prayer for the intercession of G.K. Chesterton on the back of it. Can you tell us about it first?
Well, this prayer was actually a result of two gentlemen in England who wrote the prayer, both converts from Anglicanism, one of them a former Anglican priest, and one of them now a Catholic priest. Mm-hmm. So they wrote the prayer, and we say on there it's for private devotion only. It's only because it doesn't have the nihil obstat, no objection by a bishop. Oh, and we are just trying to figure out which bishop should put that stamp on there. Yeah, and so so until it does have a no objection from a bishop, it hasn't been an approved prayer, but it's not. There's no prohibition for praying the prayer because It's asking for a potential saint's intercession that moves the development of the cult along. And as a matter of fact, we've printed up well over 10,000 of these cards and distributed them all over the world. And the prayer's been translated to 20 languages. Yeah. But we only have an English version but people, this prayer it asks for Chesterton's intercession, and also for a sign of that by granting a favor through his intercession, we can move the cause forward.
Yeah, because we kind of have to pray to him in order to see miracles from him.
And miracles through him. Yeah. And people have prayed this prayer and have seen great results.
Yeah. And where can we find those? I know where to find them digitally, but do you know where to find them?
Well, they are at www.chesterton.org.
Yeah, so chesterton.org/prayer-card, I believe. Otherwise, I'll put the link in the description in YouTube.
But if you want the physical card, just send us an email. Send it to
orders@chesterton.org.
Orders@chesterton.org. Orders@chesterton.org. It will send you 10 free cards, and we'll have your address then. But people have been asking for these cards, and the whole point, the community of saints, is this: that the saints become your friends, they become your companions. And obviously, when you ask for a saint's intercession, they start becoming a regular part of your life. And Chesterton has become friends with a lot of people. Yeah. And the prayer card is a great way to
and actually one more thing. Yeah. If you believe that Chesterton should become a saint, you can go on our website as well, and you can light a candle for Chesterton. There's an option. If you go to light a candle for Chesterton, you can light it, and it'll show up on this map where you are, because you put in where you are, and you can see how many other people lit a candle saying that Chesterton should become a saint. And it's very moving. We have well over 1,000 people who have done this, and it's a good testimony to all the people who are part of this cult following, this good cult, right?
It is a good cult, and it's we've demonstrated it really truly is an international, universal cult. It's amazing to connect with people from other countries who've had exactly the same experience with Chesterton, even though their culture is completely different. I mean, my American culture is completely different from Chesterton's English culture of the 20th century, and yet he has connected with me.
Right. Well, thank you, Dale, for being with us. That was great.
Great pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us today. Until next time, help us to make uncommon sense more common.